It has been over 3 weeks since the release of Zenless Zone Zero, and we finally have our second limited S-rank agent, Zhu Yuan. And when it comes to both of them, the question is, who has more overall value? So let's look at everything and compare the two to see their key strengths and weaknesses, and what can they both bring to the table. Welcome to my channel. My name is Kate the 7th, and I'll be your host today. Let's start with Ellen Zhou. Ellen Zhou is currently our premier ice attack agent, and she has dominated since the game's release, completely outclassing every other attack agent in the game by a large margin. Her quickness on her feet, the ability to reflect small projectiles, close the gap on evasive enemies, consistent high damage output, and having two teammates from the very beginning to help her form a top tier team has put Ellen Zhou in most players' eyes as not only a top tier agent, but also potentially the best character in the game. Ellen Zhou's main job is to output most of her team's DPS, and she definitely doesn't disappoint in this area. However, only doing great damage, while important for a DPS agent, can't be the only thing you judge them off of, as if an agent's only positive quality is that they can do great DPS, then that means the moment a new agent comes out that does more DPS than them, they will completely fall off. So when it comes to Ellen's true value, it's her consistency in output, and also her ability to engage and disengage enemies at will. Ellen Zhou is by far the most consistent DPS in the game. So long as you keep track and manage the stacks giving her ice infusion, then you're going to be doing great damage throughout the entire fight. While Ellen can do some pretty good burst damage with her ultimate, it's her basic attacks that contribute to most of her overall output. And this output, again, is very consistent. Ellen Zhou also really shines in boss fights that have a really high daze meter in in-game fights, as her consistent output lets you get so much more value out of her while the boss is dazed. But also, what I don't hear many people praise Ellen for is her ability to engage and disengage fights at any time she wishes. The act of engaging in combat is striking your enemies from any position and being able to take advantage of that position you have attacked them from. And the act of disengaging is the ability to break off and retreat from the enemy when there is too much of a risk to continue to attack. And Ellen Zhou is by far the best character in the game for this. And since players are only now just starting to get to the harder fights in Zenless Zone Zero, I can understand why so many people don't see the true value in this. So let's go and look at an example today, shall we? This is Valk, a great friend of mine and also a content creator for Zenless Zone Zero. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below. But his run here on the hardest difficulty for Withering Garden shows just how well Ellen can disengage from a fight, as the boss has a phase where you need to destroy the tentacles it spawns to move on to the next phase faster. But the issue with this is also having to constantly dodge a massive amount of projectiles in the process, making it very difficult to try and destroy all the tentacles. But if you happen to have Ellen Zhou, she has the ability to completely disengage from this part of the fight by simply running away. Her enhanced run speed gives her the chance to completely avoid all projectiles and make this phase go from being a hassle to just simply waiting it out. And when you combine this with the ability to engage whenever she needs to, on top of being paired with her amazing consistent DPS output, this makes Ellen Zhou a great DPS agent within Zenless Zone Zero. But when we come and look at Zhu Yuan, she's a little bit different in areas, as Zhu Yuan is much more of a burst DPS that relies on her mobility in a different way compared to Ellen, as Zhu Yuan's mobility allows her to keep attacking enemies in situations where other DPS may have had to disengage completely, and this is due to Zhu Yuan having built-in dodge counters in her basic attack string, allowing her to abuse the time stop mechanic in Zenless Zone Zero much more often than a typical attack agent. But Zhu Yuan, unlike Ellen, is also much more of a setup character that you really want to take full advantage of her burst window when you have your support's buffs active. Now this is to not say Ellen doesn't want to do the same as well, but Zhu Yuan absolutely needs to not waste her shots while in suppression state, as the damage outside of Zhu Yuan's suppression state falls off quickly. So being able to manage and properly use Zhu Yuan's suppression state is key to being successful with her, and there are plenty of videos online that showcase how to do this, so I'll leave a link to my friend's Roa's video showcasing how to do this exactly. But many will still have the question, which one is better, consistency or burst? Well, that truly depends, as one can truly shine in different situations than the other. The quality of consistent DPS is being able to perform in a similar way regardless of the unique enemies you are currently fighting, outside of being resistant to your element. And the quality of burst DPS is being able to have short periods of time where your DPS impacts the enemy at a much greater rate. So what does this truly mean for Ellen Zhou and Zhu Yuan? Ellen Zhou will typically perform better against enemies that have a higher daze meter, as the longer the enemy is dazed, the more Ellen's DPS catches up and can even surpass Zhu Yuan, while vice versa for Zhu Yuan, the shorter an enemy's daze meter, the better she will perform, as the less time you have to do increased damage against the enemy, the more valuable Zhu Yuan's burst window becomes, as Zhu Yuan is able to front load her damage much quicker than Ellen Zhou. But due to my recent videos in the past, I know there are many players in my comment sections that are completely new to Zenless Zone Zero and have never played a gacha game before, or it's their first time trying to learn more about the combat within a gacha game. So I'm sure a lot of players just heard the term front loaded and are wondering, what's the importance of this? So let me explain. There are 3 types of damage outputs in a game like Zenless Zone Zero: front-loaded, back-loaded, and consistent damage over time. Front-loaded is where your DPS is much greater at the beginning and falls off towards the end of your damage window, while back-loaded is where your DPS is much less at the beginning but picks up greatly towards the end of your damage window. And lastly, consistent damage over time is where your damage is spread evenly throughout the entire damage window. Historically in gacha games, backloaded damage is seen as the worst, but there are exceptions to this, as there is a character named Acheron from Honkai Star Rail, where her damage is backloaded, but many will still consider her to be either the best or second best DPS in the game. But the best output is actually dependent on the current in-game content within the game, as the more enemies we have that have short days windows to attack, the better front-loading your damage will be, and the more enemies we have that have longer days windows, the better consistent and sometimes backloaded damage will also be. But in the case of Zhu Yuan, she can actually be played as both a front-load and backload unit. I talked about this in my most recent video discussing Zhu Yuan's future in the meta of Zenless Zone Zero and how she can adapt to almost any enemy in the game, as you can choose to hold on to her suppression state bullets and use them when the time is right, or you can choose to use them immediately as well. And because of this, that means Zhu Yuan can easily choose when to release her high burst damage whenever you see the opportunity is right. As for Ellen, she does not have this option, as when you attack she will automatically consume her ice stacks. But this is not a bad thing from Ellen, as this is actually much better for her, as her multipliers are meant to be spread out evenly rather than all at once. So overall, there really isn't a definitive answer as to which output is better, as one will perform better than the other depending on the given situation. But one has to be better than the other, right? And if you force me to choose which one I would personally say is currently better, I would have to go to Ellen Zhou, but this is for a couple reasons. Ellen has a premier team right now, and Zhu Yuan does not. Being paired with Lycan and Sokaku truly takes Ellen Zhou's team to the next level, as Lycan is currently the best stunner in the game, and Sokaku is a tremendous buffer that also does great damage herself when built well. And when you pair this with Freeze being such an amazing reaction within Zenless Zone Zero currently, then you have a team that can not only immobilize enemies without needing to daze, but also has great daze buildup as well, and more than enough buffs from 2 out of 3 party members. This team is truly amazing right now, and I would give the edge to Ellen Zhou because of this. But that doesn't mean it'll stay this way forever, as we already know Shingi from the NEPs is coming in patch 1.1, and from the interactions we have seen not only in the story, but also in chapter 2 playing as Zhu Yuan, it is almost as certain to me that Shingi will be the missing piece to complete Zhu Yuan's best team, as right now the majority of the player base is using Ambi and Nicole, and as amazing as Nicole is for Zhu Yuan, Ambi could be better. So once Shingi is released to Zenless Zone Zero in patch 1.1, I believe Zhu Yuan's best team is going to give Ellen Zhou's best team a real run for its money. So as of right now, I would personally say that their max potential with their best teams currently is given to Ellen Zhou. But when Shingi finally comes out, we'll be able to see if one outshines the other. However though, regardless of what happens when Shingi comes to ZZZ, having Ellen Zhou or Zhu Yuan will still be amazing for your account. As of right now, we need 2 teams for Shiyu defense, and it's undeniable that they are the 2 strongest attack agents in the game, so having even one of them will make your life much easier for the current in-game content. And they both will be extremely strong DPS for the foreseeable future, so don't be ashamed if you skipped Ellen Zhou or Zhu Yuan. If you have at least one of them, then you are in good hands. But for the people who are watching that skipped both Ellen and Zhu, then do not worry about this either, as we are currently still in patch 1.0, and there will be so many new amazing units coming soon to Zenless Zone Zero, and I do not believe you should be pulling for a DPS agent that you do not like, as that could hinder your chances of getting a character you do enjoy in the future. But let me remind you all that we have a huge collaboration coming this week, with one being on Wednesday, July 31st, and the other on Saturday, August 3rd. So be sure to stay tuned, as you won't want to miss them. And be sure to join the Discord for weekly giveaways, as I will be announcing the winners there. And check me out on Twitter at Keta7th, and be sure to subscribe for more Zenless Zone Zero content. And as always, my name is Keta7th, and with that, I'm signing out.